My name is Osei-Frimpong, and I wanted to do this quick hit on how the male loneliness epidemic isn't just about sexual access or sex. It's more nuanced than that insofar as it also affects jobs and politics, right? So where can you go to be heard? What can you do to meaningfully produce in society and meaningfully be productive in society without running into women who want you to shut up or not do it that way, or don't, and in any sort of conjoint effort with women and sometimes with other men is now harder in ways that are non-obvious, right? So when people think about the male loneliness epidemic, it's like, well, girls aren't nice to us anymore. Well, there's a lot of that too. Young women are not particularly nice. I don't enjoy company with them. The nice ones are nice, but the ones that aren't. And feminism hasn't helped that because either you agree with them or you're a misogynist. And I don't think that's particularly great. All right. So when you talk about male loneliness, people usually just assume you're talking about, sexual access, and males can't get laid as easily as they had in some time in the imagined past. That's maybe that's part of it. It's a lot of stress. That's very stressful. And it's not just about sex. It's about finding a partner and a whole lot of anxiety, both, especially I think when you're a young man and before you find a partner, is can I find a partner? Like, is that something that's in the cards for me? Is there someone who's going to take me, warts and all? So that's a lot of anxiety, and that anxiety with a quality of independence that's made women less desirous of men and men less desirable. And I support women, being independent. I also support them being nice to men. Like not nice as in granting easy sexual access, but nice as in not, that could be one thing. That is one aspect, right? So, but that is only one aspect. I think people talk about that aspect too much. Now let's talk about jobs. We live in a time where men's jobs it's not obvious that they're preferred in the labor market, especially in non-conservatives or left to center fields, and even in conservative ones, because big companies like middle management full of women. It's a little bit easier. So you're off to start your own business, which is kind of exciting and kind of freeing, and that's great if you're a guy. But that has challenges for people too, and you need skills and a niche. And thank you for, by the way, starting appreciating my business, which is this. So go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, $50 a month, and I'll keep explaining this. But yeah, with manufacturing jobs going away and blue collar jobs just in general becoming a little bit more opaque to secure, it's not clear if you're a young man like what you're gonna aspire to in the job market and still be good, right? So a lot of this is going to skew towards good young men, right? So I think bad young men are doing pretty well. Like the right young men are actually the ones who are like already on the right. They're actually doing better. It's like the people in the middle and the left young men who are, I think, a little bit aimless and are probably going to drift towards the right because that's where people are a little bit nicer to them. So we talked a little bit about sexual access. That's the most sexy part, but not really the most interesting part of the male loneliness aspect. Also, we didn't talk about not just sexual access, but marriage, right? There's nothing more lonely than a divorced dad in a condo. They have whole condo plexes full of divorced dad, and that's not great. And they're not happy. Like divorced women are happier after divorce, which in a way makes sense. And in a way, I'm kind of okay with if that wasn't just child abuse for the kids. But divorced men aren't happy. It's kind of a sadder life for a reason. Maybe because they crave connection. So there is the sexual access thing. There is the jobs thing, which, young men don't have the same kind of career aspects or even aspirations. It's so kind of tenuous, and everyone lies to you. This used to just be true of black men, but I think it's spreading to the whites, and that's why we get to talk about it now. And then politics, and this is just about left of center politics. Left of center politics, it's not really clear that there is some like male domination in center and left of center politics. I think in center and left of center politics, women vote more. So, they already have a play, and they're not under the illusion that they necessarily have to listen to men about anything. So, I'm not really clear that there is such a gendered dominance in center and left of center politics, liberal politics and left politics, which would be fine if it's the case that men could talk to women like they talk to men, and like political people should talk to each other, right? So this idea that you enter a political space and you can make all the arguments you want as long as you don't make the women in that political space cry or feel bad, that's not really a great political space for men, right? So men, it's not just that men can't talk to women. It's that women set the terms of discourse in center and left of center political spaces. So men aren't really allowed to talk to men as they would other men. They can't treat other people like they would treat themselves. They can't debate ideas as they would. They have to still be kind of not chivalrous, but they have to be polite. And if she cries, she wins the argument. And that's not really a place you want to be. And you can't call women stupid, right? Which you can call men stupid all the time. Which dumb ideas need to be called. That's a dumb idea. But I can't do that if it makes a girl feel a certain sort of way, especially if it's a dumb idea. And someone says, yes, you can. No, actually, you can't, right? Because then the women will all go on the women's side regardless of the dumb idea, and they have to pretend that it's not dumb. And so it gets in the same thing. It gets in the same space that's wrong with untoward gender dynamics, where we end up protecting women's feelings in ways that are not particularly good for the truth. And so in those political spaces, guys just don't want to go in, because then that political space becomes a space where you have to protect women's feelings, and as opposed to work out and solve the problem, which is kind of what you should do, hash out. And that sometimes going to include saying that's a really ridiculous way to think about the problem. You should think about it this way, which you can say to another guy, but you can't say to a woman. And insofar as liberal and left political spaces are, open to women or dominated by women, you just got to let them, you got to, it's very alienating letting the bad idea just kind of waft out, and you can't say anything about it because, you would hurt her feelings. Right? So they're politically alienated. Their job prospects are relatively dicey. And then you have the marriage. You're always protecting her feelings, because if she feels some sort of way, then it could be called abuse, and then she bounces. And then you have the sexual access. So at every stage, if you're left and left of center, this is completely different for the rights, the conservatives. It's a completely different beast. But if you're left and left of center, at every stage, you are relatively on thin ice. And if you don't want to deal with it, you just, stay home. Porn's gotten better in the last 30 years, apparently. I've been married, so not 30 years, but you know what I mean. So that they can't get meaning through intimate relations, they can't get meaning through their jobs, and they can't get meaning through their politics if their politics and left of center is left of center, or center of left of center. And yeah, that's going to lead to a feeling of disposability. We're allowed to enter politics as long as we don't hold women accountable. We can't call Elizabeth Warren a liar. We can't do that. We were allowed to enter the job market, but let's be honest, you're suited for manual labor jobs that are harder on your back. And if you try to go to a knowledge economy job, you're just taking it from a woman. They'd rather have women are more pleasant to be around anyway, or at least you feel good about yourself if you hire a woman. You feel less good about yourself if you hire a young man. So there's that, and then there's the boring stuff, the marriage and the sexual access stuff. People are not very nice to you, young men, unless they're like really good looking and really have everything going on. So if you're really well raised, if everything's working right, you're doing very well. You're fine. But if you're a little bit broken, the world's not really meant for you anymore if you're a man. And that's, I think, a little bit unfortunate. If you're a man who's left of center, right? Like conservatives have a different culture supporting it, and which is why men can go over there. But left of center spaces, like nobody likes going into a political space and then having to like coddle some woman's feelings when she's wrong about something political that matters. You can't say that is an ill-informed statement, and it's actually dangerous because you could hurt somebody. Like if they listen to you and say the truth. Nobody wants to go into a space where you have to protect women's feelings about politics, right? And then they come out with data, the job market in these urban areas, it's better for women, and I don't fault employers for wanting to hire women. We just need to acknowledge that and build programs for that. Young women. No, we just need to acknowledge that and build programs for that. That, anything that involves air conditioned, women might have a better chance at doing, getting the job then. And like maybe we need to push more women into roofing and carpentry, and maybe that would balance things out. All right. So, and then you have the more boring stuff about they're lonely because they can't get sexual access. So it's a three-front war on men, left of center men. This isn't a ubiquitous war, but left of center men. And people call it patriarchy. Let me tell you, patriarchy is a family game. It's about some families ruling everybody else. And the only way you could think about men having power is you look around at all the men who don't have power and you just don't consider them men. Because the lonely men who don't have power, they're not being bad to anybody. And working class men have egalitarian relationships. So I don't know what to tell you. And egalitarian and intimate relationships. So I don't know what to tell you. It's just the people who are railing at men, most of them, especially the professional class women who rail at men, they don't even consider men lower than them to be men. like I don't know if the sexist eunuchs are just people to be avoided or just beasts of burden, but someone says Brianna Joy Gray seems to think that random high school boys are in power, or even the kids who are laughing at the girl for voting for Trump, that is an accurate representative of men. As opposed to like the guys who like she just ignores and are treated as disposable in the world, right? So, Brianna, I'm doing this because I was thinking about these issues earlier today, some of them, and then I was listening to Brianna Joy Gray, and Bad Faith podcast, and poor Ryan Grimm got sladdled. Look, in Ukraine, all right, let's look at the international politics. We have policies. In Ukraine, we're supporting a war where they're conscripting men 40 and under. They're just conscripting men. Every Palestinian man in Gaza is Hamas. You're just assumed to be Hamas. There are aid groups that only give aid to women and children. Because to be a man is to be like Hamas and a terrorist. And so we need to talk about war zone and what it means, and um, who really carries privilege in a liberal democracy, especially liberals and left of center. Like conservatives, it's a different beast. But liberals and left of center, you're just kind of taking orders from the women in your life. And, so many guys, especially I'm talking to a lot of black guys, like we grew up with single moms. I grew up with a single mom and a sister. I wasn't really sure that men could do anything competent until I was old. I grew up with single moms and a sister. So I would the idea that women can't have ideas. It sounds ridiculous. And I'm not the only one who grew up that way with a single mom. Yeah, I hope this is helpful. And I hope we start thinking about the male loneliness epidemic just more than women being not sexually available to them and being rude about it. But also them being indifferent to their jobs prospects and being indifferent to their politics, their political participation. Like you want men's votes, but you don't want to have to listen to them on the debate floor. That's not great. That's not great. Or you don't want them to have to say, you don't want to have to listen to them when they say things you don't want to hear. That's not great. That's not very welcoming in political spaces. Right? So we got to look at where did men's jobs go, and we have to look at what it is like for a man to participate in a liberal or left space that is, I wouldn't say dominated by women, but it only takes one woman with fragile feelings to quell a whole room. Just like it only takes one fly in a tent to screw up the whole to screw up the whole tent sleeping experience. All it takes is just one fly, one mosquito, screw up the whole night. All it takes is one woman with fragile feelings, and everybody in that room has to cater to those feelings. Yeah. So, and that screws up political dynamics. So yeah, you'll just back away from politics. So someone says in the comment, well done enunciating the dilemma. Thank you. Couldn't enunciate the word enunciate though. Trying to navigate white collar jobs as a hetero black man is like walking through a minefield. I wouldn't last. I'm tired of trying to pretend I'm someone I'm not. I wouldn't last in a white collar job. I couldn't do it. The only place I'm actually comfortable is raising my kids. And, it turns out I'm very good at that. But white collar jobs, blue collar jobs, maybe blue collar jobs, I just haven't worked enough of them. Didn't grow up with a dad. I don't know how to do a lot of things. I just read books. But the only thing I'm good at is teaching people how to do hard things and, talking. I'm very good at teaching kids, especially kids, how to do hard things that I guess other people don't have because I'm patient. I'm used to just people yelling at me and treating me like garbage, so I'm pretty patient. But I couldn't make it in a white collar environment. I would mouth off with some truth, and then it would end up at HR, right? So I'd have to, yeah. So I don't. The feminist workplace is nauseating. I don't know if I would be able to do it. I just don't know. Someone asked how close you're finishing PhD. So I'm writing the dissertations on no-fault divorce as a form of child abuse and these 50-50 custody arrangements. It's just bad metaphysics, and it's just going slow. I'm using Hegel, and it's going slow, and spending most of my time on my kids, and yeah. And then what's at the end of the rainbow? I have 3 more letters, but then I have to get a job at a university. And let's be honest, how long would I last at most of these universities? Cornel West just lost his job at Harvard or resigned at Harvard. So let me just raise my kids, man. Let me just raise my kids and try to do what I can do. I mean, and then you look at someone like Tommy Curry. Tommy Curry's like 3 times as smart as I am, and he got run out of Texas A&M because they wouldn't even protect him for just like doing good science. He's doing good work at Edinburgh, but I don't know if I want to go to Edinburgh. So what I do now is just raise my kids very well and read books and write about no-fault divorce as a form of child abuse. And the funny thing about this is, I was thinking about the arguments, is that it turns out that women are happier after they divorce. It just doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. A lot of people are happier when they do bad things. I'm happier if I stole $1 million. I'd have $1 million. But it doesn't mean I should steal $1 million. You could be happier if you divorce the schmuck you are with, but if it screws up your kid, you need to stay with the schmuck that you like voluntarily had sex with and had a kid with and married. That is kind of the argument from duty. But talking to women about duty is a little bit weird. It's a little bit harder than it should be in the United States. So yeah, you have a duty to stay with the schmuck you married, even if you'd be happier if you divorced, just because of the kids. If for no other reason than the kids, the light reason is because you made a promise to the dude you married. But definitely to provide a unified family for the kids, because I think kids have a right to a unified household. It could be all sorts of unified households. It could be unified in ways that are not obviously unified, but it has to be unified. It can't be the case that parents don't work out. Parents have agreed not to work out problems with each other, which means that the kid has to work out the problems. All right. So, yeah, and then we have a problem with the fact that, women aren't right about everything. They assume like in the United States, they assume a moral superiority without having to prove it. And then since it's been naturalized, like you can't confront it if you want a better world, right? So I don't think women are necessarily better parents. I don't think women are necessarily better workers, and they're not necessarily better at politics. But yet in the middle and in the leftist center, we have to pretend as if women are better parents, women are better workers, and women are better politicians. And I think that's too bad. So, like, if we could actually talk about these and you had a duty to work it out with someone who says something that you don't want to hear, that would be nothing. But without that duty, then it's just all becomes like an exercise in protecting the women's feeling year round. All right, so I got a super chat. J3 again says, communities equal families, but how can a man start a family when he can barely afford rent in 2025, 2026? First of all, we have to stop talking about rent. Forget rent. I don't want to hear about rent freeze. We need home ownership. I am here now, and you're hearing this because I own my spot, and I bought it 10 years ago. I could not pay for this spot right now, but we need black people owning stuff. We need black people owning homes. You're not free if you rent. Man, you're living in sin. You're shacking up. Even in rent controlled, like we need to talk about ownership. So forget about paying rent. We need people being able to own houses. But how can a man start a family? So here's the deal. Here's the deal about, so now I'm going to say some vaguely red pill stuff. Here's the deal about women. You don't actually need money to get a good one. People will tell you you do, but the ones you can get with money aren't really great, right? You need to be patient. So either if you have all of your stuff together, you can be poor and get a good woman in college. Because you have like a sense of, you can be poor, but you still have a sense of like gravity, and you still have a sense of knowing who you are, and you still have a sense of like not anxiety. But if you like me, or you grew up in a single house, or you got like anxiety, you're going to have to just wait. Because if you're poor in college, you're not going to be, the good ones are going to get snapped up by people who are either rich or together, right? But if you wait, they come around again in their late 20s, where they've like They've dated all the chads. They've had, like, attractive women have had all the offers in the world, and it didn't work out. And if you can get one without kids, I don't know how I'd do raising someone else's kids. Maybe I would. I don't know. But if you can get one without kids, and she's in her late 20s, she's probably going to be very cool. Very cool. Because she's had all the offers, and she's dated all the chads. She dated all the rich people. And got bored of them. And if you're interesting, then you're good. You just have to be patient, though. The 20s are going to be salad days. Because if you don't have all of your stuff together, girls in their 20s are, like, kind of awful. And I don't think they've gotten nicer. They're not awful. They're not great. It's just not great. You need all your stuff together. Like, not necessarily money, but, like, emotionally and spiritually to date one of them. Because if you don't have all of that together and you try to date one of them, they'll eat you alive. Especially if you're left of center or center. And I suspect they've gotten worse. I don't see too many incentives for girls to have gotten nicer. Not that they're, like, no longer as financially dependent on men. So I'm not really sure. Right, so you just got to wait until the second and third rounds, because I think, you know, girls in their late 20s are cool, and if they're still single in their late 20s, it's not, and if they're attractive and they're single in their late 20s, it's not because they didn't have options, it's because, like, they might have been bored, and so they're looking for someone who's not boring, and they might not necessarily be looking for your chick. But once again, I am happy that I am not trying to date now, because I'm not convinced women have gotten better, or young women have gotten better. I don't know. All right. The things. Promin says, the things that make us attractive are things we can control. Your eunice, what you give and do in the world is what attracts and keeps a mate. Well, that's maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. Some women like, you know, money and height. And for them, God bless them, I will never have either of those. But it turns out that, like, after a certain age, like, just being charming and morally interesting was enough. And it turns out, like I said, anyone who can look at me and say, you know, that guy would be a great father. First of all, you're right. And two, it turns out that matters. Problem is, a lot of girls, when they look for guys, they're not thinking about who would be a great father. They just assume that, like, kids don't need fathers, and so they screw that up. And anyway, I'm just telling you. I'm trying to save you. Trying to save you a little bit of an ordeal. What do you need to know? All right, so the male loneliness epidemic isn't just about sexual access. It's also about jobs, and then the political indifference of women to men's issues. So exactly, we don't have better labor politics in the liberal and the left of center. We don't have particularly provocative labor politics because women don't give a shit about labor. Even if they're part of the labor market, a huge part of the labor market, they just have more options, and it doesn't mean the same thing to them. I know I cursed, but I wanted to really bring that point home. They just don't care about jobs the way men care about jobs. It doesn't mean as much in the same way. And they're not willing to fight in the same way for them and for, like, an order that secures people good jobs. And when you talk about labor in left spaces, their eyes glaze over. We need to make a deal when that we expect women in the Democratic Party to fight as hard for good labor conditions for men as we expect men to fight for abortion. If that was just, like, part of the deal, part of the coalition, then, like, we would have better labor policy. Scott Galloway is a boomer grifter. He is of limited use. He is of very limited use. I mean, he's better than nothing. And Richard Reeves is actually better than him. But what we need is a Tommy Curry. But the United States isn't ready for Tommy Curry, which is unfortunate because Tommy Curry's right about almost all of the things. All right, so the indifference to Democratic women about labor issues is indicative of a gendered indifference to labor because jobs just don't mean the same thing. They mean a different thing. They mean a different thing. And we're okay. And so that's why they're okay with like a dicey labor policy. And that turns men away from the Democratic Party and understanding that the women in the Democratic Party are indifferent to the conditions of meaning for their life, for the men's lives. So that's not great. That's not great. So to be a man is in a lot of ways to be alone because you're trying to do adventure and trying to do interesting things with, gendered women who are, by culture, not by nature, by culture, more conservative about these kinds of issues. And so even if you're a leftist or in the left of center space, trying to radicalize that space is a whole job because you try to like bringing along women who are scared. And that's not particularly enjoyable. Not because the arguments aren't better, but just because they're scared of them. And not honest about how the world has protected them. And it's an ordeal. It's an ordeal. But it's one that we bear, and everyone bears their own ordeal. This is just the male ordeal that needs to be articulated also. All right, so thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, go to www.funkyacademic.com. Kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. And I will talk to you at another time. Peace.